Hello and welcome back to This Book Exists. My name's Adam Holwerda, and this book, Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson, does indeed exist. This Aurora book that came out in 2015, this one is very unique. I would say unique book. It's about a interstellar spaceship mission. When we talk about it, building starships to escape the planet and start colonizing other planets. This book is about what that would entail. It's very hard to describe this book, I feel like. It is, in one way, it is like the 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, but a science fiction version. So it doesn't take place all in one lifetime in one character's mind, necessarily. And it doesn't take place in one century or in one trip. I'd say the whole book probably spans about 500 years, maybe a little less. This is the spaceship that's basically the one described. It has 2 rings, it has 1 spine, and inside of the rings there are situated multiple biomes. Some of them are Arctic, some of them are desert, some of them are forest, some of them are oceanic. And then on these biomes also there is a smattering or selection of flora and fauna that live in those biomes. Carefully selected from Earth, but also needs to be constantly curated in the process. The book begins with the family of the ship's engineer. The engineer's name is Devi, and her husband's name is Badim or Badim, and then her daughter's name is Freya. You spend a lot of the first, maybe fifth of the book, following Devi around as she looks into different aspects of what's going wrong on the ship. A lot of the things that are going wrong on the ship, it seems like, are very big problems. There's like imbalances in one biome that are affecting a different biome, or some crop cycle that used to be going is now broken because of some machinery got too old and had to be recreated with a nanobot technology. They don't really go into a lot of detail about how the mechanical printing structure works. The ship rebuilds parts of itself and reconfigures itself for various purposes. And the reason it's doing that, a lot of times, is to help the humans do whatever they're doing. There's all these problems, and Devi is talking back and forth about these problems she's trying to solve, and the ship is like, I'm just a ship, I don't really know how to solve that. And she like teaches it skills slowly over time to be able to solve those things. Like, hey, I need to figure out the root cause. She's trying to do a root cause analysis, and the only thing that has access to all the information is the ship. So the ship will have to then be like, okay, let me like try to synthesize all of my data in some way that provides a narrative. So there's a lot of false starts where it starts a narrative and Devi says, no, not like that. It's got to have these things in it, metaphors and similes and other constructions. And the book's structure is like pretty faithfully following these rules that Devi sets out. At the end of a chapter, the ship will just try to do like a metaphor or try to make things work that way, which I think is a super cool construction. I have a lot of respect for this author from a writing point of view. The fact that you were able to make all of these constructions kind of work towards this overall narrative, it's cool that he did that. And so that's a big portion of the book, is like, you have to believe that the ship becomes conscious. And you do that because you get to see into all of these narrative chats that Devi has with the ship. Everything's from this like top-down or algorithmic metadata squashing perspective, where anything that was available to the ship's computer, which it turns out is a lot of information, it has audio visual, it has mapped almost every part of the interior of the ship. It knows all of this information about the ship, and it's able to create what's considered a narrative. So the actual main character, I would say, of the book is not the ship. The ship is just the narrator, which becomes illustrative at certain points because you're expecting the main character to be emoting in certain ways, or to have an inner dialogue or an inner narrative that they're experiencing, and it's not really happening. we think the main character is Devi at the beginning because Devi is the ship's engineer, and Devi's conversation with the ship, the actual main character ends up being Devi's daughter, a young woman. I think at the beginning of the book she's 14. Her name is Freya, and we meet her and she doesn't really do anything or know anything, and that kind of becomes the plot of what's going on. Freya is dumb, it seems, in comparison to her like Mensa level parents who are like geniuses probably. And Freya is just like, well, this information you're telling me is probably true and probably important, but I don't care about it. She very much is I would say, a person of experiences. She's like a human who like needs to be outside, which is ironic considering the end of the book, but she needs to be doing experiments, and she needs to be going places and talking to people, and she needs to be sneaking around and figuring out all the things on her own, because the way that she learns is not by being told about it. And Freya is meeting people in the ship who think that they're very cool. These are like hoodlum kids who would probably be spray painting stuff and going into caves and scratching their name on stuff or whatever. She becomes friends with one, and one's name is Yuan. Euan, but I just thought of them as like Ewan, like Ewan McGregor or something. So finally, when we get to this other solar system, which happens maybe halfway through the book, the planet that they end up trying to orbit, the moon, is called Aurora. They send a landing party down, and it's like a water world with this specific wave pattern that the waves are really big and long and tall, and the gravity is a little bit different than what everyone has been experiencing. And then also the planet itself is just like very windy and very loud, and they wait for the sun to go down. There's not really a sun that goes down. It's different than that. There's 2 stars in the sky, or there's like multiple sources of light that then have to coalesce at a certain point. And anyway, it's very interesting, like the way that Kim describes the interactions between the moon, the planet, and then the sun in that environment. After they reach this other planet, they go down onto this moon. Freya's friend Ewan is down on the moon, and disaster strikes in a way that is unrecoverable. I don't want to give too much away. I loved this book. I think this book is like very philosophical. It's also very realistic in the way of like describing society, describing governance, describing humans who can't get along and don't know how to interact in new situations. It's very realistic in the way that it does adaptation. It doesn't pull any punches with trying to keep a character alive just because you as a reader felt attached to it. The ship, the narrator, is another character that you start to feel an attachment to, and you know that because at some point in the story something happens with the ship. I'm glad I read this book. I do have questions about some open like things that were left like to worry or wonder about. One thing I'll say is that, so Philip K. Dick, when he was writing his books, he would often say, oh, I need to create a world that doesn't fall down by itself, or that can stand on its own, basically. This book does a good job of world building, creating the environment, making the reader believe everything is happening, introducing like solutions to problems that don't feel like Deus Ex Machina. Because like you really could just be like, oh, here's a problem, and then immediately they solve it. It's not like that at all. There's a problem, you worry about it as a reader, as though it's not a written artifact that somebody could just throw in a solution. You worry about it being like, how are they going to solve that? And sometimes they can't. So that is my review / just talking about Aurora so that I can remember it, which is another reason why I'm doing these videos, is just to be able to remember stuff. It's like a physical representation of my brain. There's been a few comments on my Palmer Eldritch video. It's so fun seeing like the comments of people who read that book. Go to YouTube, search for that book title. type something under that video. It's so fun. And that's kind of what I want to be creating on my channel, is just like a place to talk about the books that I've read with everyone. And then obviously a place to talk about the books that I write eventually, but those are coming attractions for a future that doesn't exist yet. I'm Adam Holwerda, and this is Aurora by Kim Stanley Robinson. This book exists. I'll see you next time.